Hey, checking in.
What's the last name?
Mitchell? Steve? Yeah.
I found you. This is for you.
Okay.
This is to get into everywhere at the convention.
Okay.
Go up the escalator, and at the top you will get your registration bag and everything else up there.
Oh, hello, Minders. Welcome back to the Mind of Watercolor. Well, that's how it all started. The Plein Air Convention and Expo, and man, was that an experience. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I wanted to go to Pace for a long time. It's usually way out west, and none of the circumstances aligned very well. But when I found out it was coming east of the Mississippi, by the way, first time ever east of the Mississippi, and to Cherokee, North Carolina, only 2 hours from where I live, I had to go. My wife said, "Oh, you've got to go." Really great. Just had a wonderful time. And it was a spectacle. It was something interesting to see, in addition to all the great people. Now, Eric Rhodes is the consummate promoter, and he knows how to bring you in and make it fun. He's got this thing for dancing. I see him getting a lot of people to dance, but I don't see him doing a whole lot of it. Still, it was really fun. The vendor room, oh boy, it's like an artist's candy store. I think, though, the thing that impressed me most about the vendor room, or the expo hall where all the vendors were, is they put some of their most knowledgeable people in there. So if you had questions about art supplies and you had your eye on something, and you would see a lot of stuff that you did not see usually, or might not have seen before, and you had questions about it, they usually could answer it. So yeah, I spent a little bit of money. Rosemary Brushes was there, and I thought that was cool. I was at their booth 2 different days buying some stuff. I bought some really great travel brushes. I went back the next day, and Rosemary herself, the woman who started the company, was actually there waiting on customers. And it was great just listening in on some of the conversations, the questions that people had, and her knowledgeable answers. So I, for some reason, did not bring any big brushes and was finding myself wanting some larger wash brushes, wondering why I didn't bring them in the first place. I picked out 3 or 4, but anyway, I went to check out with my brushes, and who comes up to wait on me but Rosemary herself. Tallies up the brushes, takes my payment, comes back and hands the brushes to me, and I'm like, I don't suppose I could get a picture with you, could I? Oh, she was so accommodating. Zoomed right on out of her booth, came around, there was a selfie. And that's probably a great icon for the way the whole convention was. The people are so friendly. After coming home, I was sad that I didn't get more pictures of people that I had met. It only occurred to me partway through, I'm terrible at this, at how many selfies I could have taken with great people that I met. There were nearly 1,000 painters, and you meet them in all situations. You sit by them in the main stage hall, you get in line with them for breakfast, you bump into them, doing this or that, buying supplies, people looking over your shoulder and say, well, I like this, what do you like, blah, blah, blah. But you have nearly 1,000 people all with the same thing in common, or something in common, and that's art and painting. Just a shout out to Justin Donaldson. If you saw my studio tour, you saw where I have a print of his. Well, I got to paint with him on the first day, and that was a lot of fun. And then they awarded him sort of Breakout Artist of the Year. Big congratulations to him, very deserved. He's a very talented artist. And just a big shout out to Doug. Kind of hit it off, and just a really nice fellow to talk to. He's sort of in his beginning of his painting journey, but a super kind spirit and generous spirit. He drove to the next 2 paint outs, and I painted with him, and then he and his wife invited me to dinner. I mean, it was just amazing. I was blown away. Both of them had such a congenial, kind, and generous spirit. And speaking of the workshops, I went to the Ian Stewart workshop. He was very humorous. He had a lot of great tips. Went to the Richard Sneary workshop. Very impressed with how patient and deliberate a painter he was. I loved his design. Had very sort of abstract, interesting shapes that he made, but yet it was a realistic scene. More great tips from him. Most impressive demonstrator in that You could tell he was very comfortable with the demonstration process in front of a whole bunch of people. Was Amit Kapoor, really fantastic watercolorist from India. And that was just a performance. I mean, it was amazing. It was amazing to watch him put together a scene that ended up being loose, but yet looking very detailed and doing it very efficiently and quickly. And then there were the paint outs. Oh, I loved the paint outs. Of course, I mean, and it was so fun because you're out there with all these other artists, and just everywhere you look, there's artists set up with easels. So the first day was Great Smoky Mountain National Park, and we went specifically to the Econo-Lefty Visitor Center, which is at the southern entrance to the national park. They have some big fields. They had sort of a farm, a rustic farm there, and a lot to see. I mean, you could spend a week just painting there, and really that was kind of true of all the locations. That was the day I went with Justin Donaldson, and we set up in the back of the field, sort of. This was my scene. I just loved this wood's edge and how the light was hitting the trees in the field. I opted to use the Arche painting journal, the cold press painting journal, and I divided it into two pieces. I did one that was mostly hybrid. Well, they both actually were hybrid watercolor and gouache. Spent the most time on this first one. The second one I did much quicker. I wanted to do something very fast, kind of loose. I ended up doing a lot of work to it later, but I got the gist of the scene while I was there. And there was a river behind. Really beautiful scenic river, and I was wishing that could have had time to come back there and paint. Several people set up and painted over there. There were elk filtering through the woods and eventually came out into the field. Just fun, fantastic. On day 2, we were supposed to go to the Econo-Lefty Indian Village. So they instead went on to open up day 3, so you had your option of either location. And day 3 was going to be Darnell Farms. So we went to Darnell Farms instead. We ended up going to that location for 2 days. And lots to choose from there. Distant mountains, a really neat barn. They had a market, sort of a farmer's market. They had a river. So on the first day, I did these little studies. This is all transparent watercolor. As you can see, I broke my sketchbook page up into 3 sections. On day 3, we went back to Darnell Farms, and I decided to travel light and do line and wash. So I wanted to try this Etcher Nano satchel that they sent me. Everything I carried with the exception of my chair fit in this satchel. I just used a water brush, a fountain pen, a small palette. And line and wash was the order of the day. Well, during this day, we had a downpour. We all had to kind of make a run for it, get under the shelter and the farmer's market shelter. Everyone was buying these dream whips, which were amazing. The downpour didn't last very long, but it did cut our time short. So I only got these 2 line and wash, but I managed to get a picture of the barn, and the lower left part is where I'd planned to put the barn. So I would have 3 line and wash sketches for the day. So having a good photo, I was able to fill that in after I got home and kind of complete the spread. Painters everywhere. I mean, just look. Here's a little bit of a walkthrough, and this only represents just portions of the painters that were there. I mean, you could spend all your time just walking around looking and watching what other people are doing. It was really great. Well, that evening were the closing ceremonies, and they did the announcement for the next pace, which I plan to go to. It's in Reno and Lake Tahoe, and I have never been out there, so I thought it would be great. And after this experience, I was anxious to go someplace that had a very different vibe and landscape. So I'm looking forward to that. Pace 25, May 19th through the 23rd, I think. So the final day, and we all checked out of wherever we were in the hotels, motels, left and headed to Biltmore, which is about an hour away, Biltmore Estate. And it was an all-day paint out. Of course, now I'm really in my element because I'm just very familiar with Biltmore. I've been there many, many times. Now, the number of painters was not as obvious there because that is such a vast estate that everyone was so spread out. I knew I didn't want to paint in front of the house. Very familiar with the house. I have always wanted to paint the conservatory, so I set up at the conservatory. And there were, I don't know, maybe a dozen painters very close to where I was painting, just in the conservatory and the gardens. I was just above the rose garden. Oh man, I snagged the perfect spot. I had my own bench. I had shade for hours. I came away with this painting, which was not finished, but it was about 80% there, and then finished it at home. What a great day. I painted for nearly 4 hours, and after the travel time that morning, I was pretty cooked. So around 4 o'clock, I headed home. But that was pace, and what an enjoyable experience. What wonderful people to meet and talk to, and I can't wait to go back next year. Thanks everybody, I appreciate you watching. Thank you patrons for your support. I couldn't be doing this without you. We'll see everybody in the next video. Bye-bye.